Hi everyone! You may have heard of Silent Hill, one of the most successful video games at the turn of the millennium, which was also followed by a movie. The characteristics that distinguishes both is the atmosphere of desolation that surrounds the town in which they are set. Did you know that the creators of the game were inspired by a real US town? This town is Centralia. Centralia was a small town located in Columbia County, Pennsylvania, whose economy was based on coal mining. In fact, underground deposits of anthracite were discovered, and starting from the mid-19th century, the first mines were opened. In 1890, at the height of its economy, 2,761 inhabitants lived there. Coal has been mined for several decades. However, in the 19th century, the extraction suffered a continuous decline, and several abandoned mines, still rich in raw material, remained in the ground. In 1962, the population was equal to 1,100 inhabitants. In 2020, only 5 persons live there. Its zip code was withdrawn in 2002. Buildings and houses were demolished. Internal roads lead nowhere. There are no shops, no schools, nothing. Just a small volunteer fire station. Centralia is in effect a ghost town. What happened to Centralia to force its inhabitants to abandon it? In 1962, for still unknown reasons, a fire broke out in the vicinity of an anthracite tunnel. The fire thus managed to enter and make its way through the large veins of coal that still extend underground. The first attempts to suffocate the flames were unsuccessful. Actually, anthracite is an extremely hard coal, difficult to ignite, but equally difficult to extinguish in case of combustion. In a short time, Centralia turned into a ghostly place. Trees died, cracks and chasms formed in the streets and in the ground. It seems that the fire has spread over a stretch of 3,700 acres and has enough combustible material to consume and continue to burn for a century or longer. A recent study, published in 2011, has based its temperature analysis on thermal infrared imagery. This study reports that the fire front is slowing down. This suggests that the problem may extinguish earlier than previously thought. In 1979, a gas station owner noticed a rise in the temperature of the fuel. It turned out that the underground gasoline tanks had reached a temperature equal to 172 degrees Fahrenheit. A few years later, in 1981, an event rekindled the spotlight on this town. A 12-year-old boy, Todd Dombowski, fell into a sinkhole that opened in the ground near a tree in his grandmother's backyard. He sank about 6.6 feet into the muddy, steamy earth, before slowing his fall thanks to a tree root. Beneath his feet there was a hole 33 feet deep. He would have died quickly if another child hadn't heard his screams and helped him get out of the sinkhole. Actually, the hot steam billowing from the hole contained a little level of carbon monoxide-rich smoke. The temperature of the ground in Todd's grandmother's backyard was measured and found to be around 570 degrees Fahrenheit. By then, the fire had already caused a collapse and damaged the road near the village, a part of Route 61, where cracks began to open due to the underground heat. Residents noticed that in their houses the floors in contact with the ground were warmer than normal. Within a few weeks after the Todd Dombowski incident, the frequency of collapses accelerated and the holes in the ground became hundreds. All the national media dealt with the case, and the federal government decided to approve a final plan for Centralia, while the residents rushed to install in their homes expensive carbon monoxide and oxygen level detectors, which did ring a bell if the air in the rooms became unbreathable. The United States Bureau of Mines estimated that the cheapest solution to extinguish the fire would cost an enormous amount of money at that time, $20 million. So, with little success, the local firefighters tried to pump thousands of gallons of water into some tunnels. In 1984, the government allocated $42 million to buy all the houses in the city and demolish them after their inhabitants had been transferred. In 1992, the process was almost concluded after a series of very advantageous agreements for the citizens. However, not everyone wanted to leave. By 1992, 53 homeowners remained in Centralia, with no intention of accepting the proposed government deal. To resolve the situation, the Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Bob Casey declared the expropriation of the Centralia area for public safety reasons. After the demolitions, 20 years ago, the small town was already very similar to what it looks like today. The ruined roads cross large deserted spaces, road signs still all in place, while the forest slowly expands. A few thousands of feet of the road leading from the town of Ashland to Centralia, the Pennsylvania Route 61, were definitely abandoned in the early 1990s and replaced by a new route that bypasses the area affected by the fire. The asphalt of the abandoned stretch, full of cracks and holes, is covered with graffiti, hence the name Graffiti Highway, coined around 2010. Now it has been covered with dirt to prevent unwary tourists from falling into the chasms that had opened years earlier. The last remaining inhabitants, who no longer had to pay local taxes thanks to the expropriation process, were not evicted immediately, remaining in their homes for many years. Today, Centralia is a ghost town, where the remaining residents can be counted on the fingers of their hands, 5 in 2020. They are over 70 years old people who have spent most of their lives walking over the underground fire every day. Not much remains of the town of Centralia. However, its history and desolate scenery, with dozens of small holes in the ground from which small columns of smoke come out, attract thousands of tourists every year, particularly from Philadelphia, which is only a 2-hour drive away. To date, after 60 years from the beginning of the disaster, it's not certain which event triggered the Centralia tragedy. The most accepted view is that the borough ordered a group of 5 volunteer firefighters to burn trash in the former strip mine, and for some reasons they failed to put out the fire properly. The fire entered the underground soil, reaching anthracite, so triggering its combustion. If the emergency of the evacuees has been solved, transforming Centralia into a ghost town today, the problem at the origin of the evacuation has not been solved at all. Centralia is sadly famous for an eternal fire more than 320 feet deep. This small town is a hell of flames and poisonous fumes, which has threatened and still threatens people, flora, fauna, the environment, and human structures. Suddenly, a tragedy transformed this small town into a macabre tourist attraction for the bravest ones.